Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Sheila Gothard, and I am proud and excited to share some information with you for the Empowered Girls of North Carolina platform. And I've been asked to put together something that I feel would benefit not only our young women and men, as well as parents who are out there who are surviving with us in this journey of pandemic, as well as being out of school and doing school online. So I absolutely understand what's going on. And I've heard from a lot of you out there, and I understand that there are some challenges. So I really wanted to just share with you some of the things that I found that was really beneficial during my academic journey. And one of my favorite things to do is read and study. And I, know that I'm a little different. However, I do understand too that some of the times that can be challenging. So I'm going to share with you one of my favorite study skill strategy. First of all, when I started school, I didn't even know that there were strategies and study skills. I just thought that whatever the teacher asked me to do, whether it would be in person or online, as we're actually going through right now, but I just thought I would just do that and not think that there was an actual strategy that I should incorporate just to make sure that I'm doing everything possible to retain the information. So my favorite strategy, and there are many, my favorite strategy is called the SQ3R method. All right, and I didn't make this up. It's been out there. That's what's so mind-blowing. I had gone through a whole degree before I realized that there was a way to make things so much easier. And for parents, if you're finding yourself struggling to help your student retain information and comprehend information, this is going to be helpful for you too. So I'm just going to get right into it. SQ3R. I'm going to share my screen with you right now. If you give me 1 second to share the screen. And hopefully you're still there with me. There, we've got SQ3R. Again, so I'm just going to go through this briefly so we'll know what the S stands for, which is survey. There's also Q, which means question, and we'll talk about each one of these very briefly. And the 3 R's are read, write, recall. All right, so SQ3R, survey, question, read, recite, and recall. And we'll come back to that in just a bit. So now, when you are asked, again, whether it's online or whether it's in person, to say read chapter, I have an example here, and I've got my book, an actual book that I did. In fact, this is my own. It's probably backwards, sorry about that. But a book that I used to study, and this is called Student Development in College. That is my background. So, and I would be asked to read actually this entire book in a semester, but at times I'm given an assignment and I'm asked to read, say, chapter 9. Well, what I would do before I discovered this strategy is go ahead, pick up my book, and just start reading chapter 9. What's even worse is if they say read chapter 9 through 12. Start reading chapter 9, go right through chapter 12. All right, well, it may be different settings, but what will often happen is that by the time I get to chapter 10, I've forgotten what happened in chapter 9. So this SQ3R method is a way to help you remember that and retain it. So in times when you're taking a test, whether it be an essay or a test where you can use notes or you can't use notes, it'll be easily recalled. So the S, survey. So survey. Generally, that is the first mistake that we make when we're asked to do an assignment. We don't survey the chapter. You don't start and read. You just don't start reading, all right? It's almost like when you're baking a cake. You get your ingredients together. You just don't throw it in the oven. You have to preheat the oven. And if your brain is not preheated and ready to take on what you're about to read, then it makes it a little bit more difficult, right? All right, so when you're surveying, again, you're preheating your brain. You're going through your chapter, and I've got some other examples for you. I don't know if you can see that. So you're going through your chapter. I'm not just going to start reading here and just start reading because that can be a little dense. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read my title. Read my title. I'm going to see what is it that I'm actually going to be reading about. Then I'm just going to go over and skim my subheadings. You're not reading yet, okay? You're just going to read your subheadings. Now, if you have subheadings, you're taking a look at those, and if you have graphs or diagrams and things like that, you want to just take a look at that. You're getting your brain ready for what you want to learn, okay, or what the instructor has for you to learn. So that next step, the Q in there are questions, all right? Now, sometimes your textbook, which is really great, it'll have questions in the back of the chapter. That's what's so weird to me, especially using this strategy, that the questions are in the back of the chapter. Really, you want to read those questions first, all right? And to use multi-sensory knowledge, meaning you're using more than one sense to remember the information. You're not only going to see it, you're going to write it, okay? So, and then you're going to actually talk about it, and we'll talk about that a little later. So, the S, you're surveying, okay? You're not reading yet, you're just surveying. The Q are the questions, all right? So you're going to write out questions that would that you would ask as you're reading. So for example, my chapter 10 is ecological approaches to college student development. All right, my first question is, what is the definition in this sense of ecological? All right. My second question would be, what are the approaches? I may ask, how many approaches is it? Okay. So that's just from the heading. I've got 2 questions already written. Then I could go to the subheadings. And in one of these subheadings, it talks about a theory or a component of the theory. My question is, who wrote the theory? All right, so just write that question down. Who wrote the theory? You don't have to answer it at that point. You're just writing your questions down, all right? Or you're using the questions at the back of the book, see? So now you're reading with the purpose. When you get ready to start reading, you're reading with the purpose, and your mind is prepared to read, to be able to answer these questions that you've already asked yourself or prepared or have in the back of the book. Does that make sense so far? All right, good. All right, so S, survey, Q, questions. Now we're going to the 3 R's. The first R is read, all right? Now you're beginning to read. Do you see there was 2 steps before you actually start reading? Again, remember, I used to go in and just start reading. Now we're going to read, and I'm going to share my screen again so we could look at this, okay? So read, you see, you're going to look for answers to your questions, all right? That's what you're looking for. And the third R is to recite, all right? Consider what you want to remember from the questions, all right? Now, in reciting, one of the things that I used to talk about when I was a professional in higher ed, people will say, oh, I feel funny just, reciting. Yeah, that's using another sense. When you're talking, you're using hearing, all right? Again, we're talking about multisensory. So you're hearing yourself, all right? And you can play school if you want. That's what I used to do. When I was finishing a degree when my kids were really small and I wanted to spend some quality time with them, they didn't know that I was actually helping myself remember information. We would play school, and I would tell them or recite the information that I'm reading. It didn't matter until they got older what I was reading, but I would recite that information. And if you have older siblings or things like that, tell them you're going to teach them something and give them the assignment of asking you questions. You'd be very surprised. Some of the questions that they may ask, they may just simply say, well, what's that? Answer that question, and then make sure you note it as you're answering that question, because could possibly be questions that you could have to recall for an essay or a test. All right, so we've got SQ, the 3 R's. First R is read, the next one is recite. Okay, so the last R, I'm going to share my screen again so you can see that. All right, is to reread your notes. Now, your notes are actually just the questions, all right? So you have taken that whole assignment and you've combined it or condensed it into some notes, all right? So you're only going to read those notes because you have some very important questions that you have written down and that you've developed and unpacked. So you're going to reread your notes and link the information with your own experience. All right. So what that means is, what do I know about that? Like in my book that I was studying, I was also working in the profession. I would actually stop and think, okay, what do I know about this theory? Who do I know that may have experienced this? And how can I relate this information to what I'm reading or writing? So it doesn't have to necessarily be this book. This theory works for any textbook. All right, so I'm going to share my screen again. Give me just a second. You see where, sorry about that, folks. There we go. And we're going to share the screen. And I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger. This is an example of some reading that you may have. Hopefully you can see that. All right, and this is what your text may look like. Okay, so you see where it says Fall of the Roman Empire? That's your title. All right, and then, oh, and also notice that they're using color pens with that and circling the subtitles. So feel free to get very creative. A lot of those things you can actually remember better if you use color pens or pencils and things like that. So you notice in red, there's your subtitles. That the first one is the Century of Crisis. And then you, again, think about what questions can you ask about the crisis. What was the crisis? What year was it? We know it was a century, but as you read and develop, you'll find out, answer those questions approximately what year it was. And then in purple squares, if you see those are what we call the subtitles, all right? And look over to the right, there's a chart, all right? We're not gonna go through all that right now, but go through that chart, look at it and see what kinds of things you can pull from that. Charts can be very, very, very important when you're reading, okay? So you're going to recite that information and tell yourself what that means, all right? So again, the SQ3R method, that is a study strategy. And if you have any questions regarding any of the strategies that I've talked about here, please feel free to comment on this. You can also, Sheila Gothard is my name. You can send me a message on this or contact those leaders in Empowered Girls of North Carolina. I'd be glad to answer those questions for you. All right, hope that's been a big help. Thanks, and you have a great day.